The big space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark between three star systems like a giant metal city. Ships came and went every hour, bringing aliens from all over the galaxy to trade goods and make deals. The station had wide metal hallways that curved around its spinning sections and huge windows that showed the stars outside. Today was different, though. Everyone on the station was talking about the same thing. After 50 long years of asking and waiting, the humans had finally been accepted into the Galactic Trade Union. Some aliens were happy about this news, while others were not so sure about letting the humans join their group. Commander Vex stood in the main docking bay with his squad of 6 soldiers. He was a Krillin warrior, which meant he was very tall with purple skin that looked almost black in the station lights. His species had 4 strong arms instead of 2 like humans did, and their faces had sharp features that made them look dangerous, even when they were being friendly. The Krillins had been the strongest military force in this part of space for over 300 years. They controlled dozens of planets and had the biggest warships anyone had ever seen. Most other alien species were afraid of them, or at least showed them a lot of respect when they met. Commander Vex was used to other beings bowing to him and his kind. He watched with cold eyes as a small Earth transport ship came through the energy barrier that kept the air inside the docking bay. The ship was much smaller than most alien vessels and looked almost plain compared to the fancy ships that other species used. To Vex, this was proof that humans were not important enough to be in the trade union. The airlock on the human ship opened with a soft hiss, and out came 2 people. The first was an old man who looked like he might be 70 years old. He had gray hair that was neatly combed and kind eyes that had many wrinkles around them from years of smiling. He wore simple work clothes that were clean but not fancy, and carried a small bag over his shoulder. The old man's name was Park, and he moved slowly but steadily like someone who had seen many years but was still strong enough to do his job. Behind him came a young woman named Kim, who worked as a translator for human traders. She looked nervous as she stepped onto the station and saw all the different alien species watching them. Park looked around the docking bay and saw Commander Vex and his soldiers waiting for them. The old human had been briefed about Krillin customs before he came to the station, so he knew they valued strength and direct communication. What he did not know was that Vex had already decided to dislike humans before even meeting them. Following what he thought was proper human politeness, Park walked over to the Krillon commander and bowed his head in a respectful greeting. This was a mistake that would change everything that happened next. In Krillon culture, only servants and slaves bowed to their masters. Free warriors looked each other in the eye and never lowered their heads to anyone. When Vex saw the old human bow, to him he thought Park was either calling him a master or making fun of Krillin traditions. Both ideas made the alien commander very angry. Without any warning, Vex raised one of his 4 powerful arms and slapped Park hard across the face. The sound echoed through the docking bay like a gunshot and made everyone stop what they were doing to look. The old human stumbled backward from the force of the blow and blood began to run from his nose. Kim gasped and started to rush forward to help Park, but the old man held up his hand to stop her. He wiped the blood from his face with his sleeve and looked at Commander Vex with eyes that seemed much older and more dangerous than they had just moments before. Other aliens in the docking bay had different reactions to what they just saw. Some of the younger ones laughed, thinking it was funny to see a human get hit by a Krillin warrior. Others looked uncomfortable but did not want to get involved in something that was not their business. A few alien traders who had worked with humans before started to quietly move away from the area, like they knew something bad was about to happen. Park stood there bleeding and spoke in a voice that was quiet but somehow carried to every corner of the large docking bay. He said, "Commander, I think you should check your files before you do something you cannot take back." This made Vex laugh even louder, and his squad of soldiers joined in with their own cruel laughter. The Krillin commander looked at the small old human and said, "What could an old human possibly do to me? Your species is weak. You have no claws, no thick skin, no poison glands. You are just soft meat, walking around in clothes that thinks it belongs, with real warriors." But then something changed. One of Vex's soldiers named Talk came running up with a data pad in his hands. Talk was younger than the other soldiers, and his job was to check the files on new arrivals to make sure there were no security problems. His purple face had turned a lighter shade, which meant he was scared or shocked about something. Talk whispered something into his commander's ear while showing him the screen of the data pad. As Vex listened, his confident smile began to fade away. His 4 eyes grew wide as he read whatever information Talk had found about the old human standing in front of them. Park waited patiently while the alien commander read the file. The bleeding had stopped, but there was still blood on his clothes and face. Kim did not understand what was happening, but she could feel that the mood in the docking bay was changing. The air felt heavy like the moment before a thunderstorm hits. More aliens started checking their own data pads and communication devices. Word began to spread through the crowd about who this old human really was. Some aliens immediately left, the area not wanting to be anywhere near what was about to happen. Others stayed to watch, but moved much further back than they had been before. The docking bay became very quiet except for the usual sounds of machinery and air recycling systems. Even those seemed quieter than normal, as if the station itself was holding its breath to see what would happen next. Park stood in the center of it all, bleeding but calm like a man who had been in situations like this many times before and knew exactly how they would end. Commander Vex stared at the datapad in his 4 hands, reading the same information over and over again, like his brain could not accept what his eyes were seeing. His soldier Talk kept pointing at different parts of the screen, and his voice was getting higher with panic as he tried to explain what he had found. The file showed that Park had served in something called the Terran Defense Force for 45 years. But this was not just any soldier or even a regular officer. The battle history listed conflicts that made even the bravest Krillin warriors feel cold inside when they heard the names. The siege of Kepler Station, where human forces held off an alien invasion for 6 months with no supplies or reinforcements. The Mars Rebellion, where human soldiers fought in the tunnels under the planet's surface for 3 years. The defense of Luna City, where a small group of humans stopped an entire fleet from destroying Earth Moon Base. These were not just battles. They were legends told in military academies across dozens of worlds, stories that instructors used to teach young soldiers about courage and sacrifice and never giving up, even when everything seemed hopeless. Most aliens thought these stories were made up to make humans seem more dangerous than they really were. But the file had dates and official records and detailed reports from multiple alien governments who had witnessed these battles. Everything was real and documented and verified by sources that could not be questioned. This meant the old bleeding human standing in front of them was not just a veteran. He was a living legend. The worst part for Commander Vex was reading the final entry in Park's military record. The old man had not retired as a regular soldier or even a high-ranking officer. He had retired as Supreme Commander of all human military forces across every colony and outpost and warship in their territory. This meant Park had once commanded millions of human soldiers and thousands of warships, and had made decisions about life and death for entire planets. The quiet old man with blood on his face had once been the most powerful military leader in human space, and probably knew more about warfare than any living being in the galaxy. Other aliens in the docking bay were checking their own information systems and finding the same shocking facts. The news spread through the crowd like fire jumping from tree to tree in a dry forest. Some aliens immediately packed up their goods and left, not wanting to be anywhere near what was about to happen. Others stayed but moved much further back and started recording everything with their devices. They knew they were witnessing something that would become a story told across the galaxy for many years to come. The day an old human warrior was insulted, and what happened next. Kim finally understood what was happening when she heard 2 alien traders talking in worried voices about human military history and something called the Battle of Proxima, where human forces had defeated an army 10 times their size. Her face went white as she realized what kind of terrible mistake Commander Vex had just made. She knew that Park never talked about his time in the military. During their 6 months traveling together, he had always focused on peaceful trade and building good relationships with alien species. He seemed like somebody's grandfather who just wanted to help make the galaxy a better place for everyone. But now Kim was seeing a different side of the old man. His posture had changed from relaxed to alert. His breathing was controlled and steady. His eyes were no longer the kind eyes of a gentle trader, but the cold, calculating eyes of someone who had made life and death decisions in the heat of battle. Park stood perfectly still, but somehow every small movement he made seemed calculated and precise. The way he shifted his weight, the way he kept his hands loose at his sides, the way he watched every person in the area while appearing to look at nothing in particular. This was what decades of combat training did to a person. It became part of who they were even when they got old. Commander Vex looked up from the datapad and his four hands were shaking slightly. He wanted to apologize and take back what he had done, but his pride would not let him. In front of his squad and dozens of other aliens, he could not show weakness or admit he had made a mistake. The Krillon Empire had a reputation to maintain, but deep inside his mind, Vex knew he had just done the most stupid thing of his entire military career. He had insulted and attacked one of the most dangerous warriors in the known galaxy, a human who had spent his whole life learning how to fight aliens exactly like Krillons and knew every weakness in their anatomy and psychology. The stories about human warriors were not myths, after all. They were warnings that other species should have listened to more carefully. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years before they ever reached the stars. While other species developed technology to avoid conflicts, humans had perfected the art of warfare and turned it into a science. When humans finally left Earth and spread across the galaxy, they brought with them knowledge that no other species possessed. They knew how to fight in zero gravity and how to survive in the vacuum of space with minimal equipment. They knew how to turn everyday objects into deadly weapons and how to use an enemy's strength against them. Most importantly, they knew how to fight when everything seemed hopeless. Other alien species would surrender when defeat looked certain, but humans would keep fighting until their last breath. This desperation, combined with their technical skills, made them the most feared warriors in known space. Park took one small step forward, and somehow that single movement made the huge docking bay feel much smaller and more dangerous. When he spoke, his voice was still quiet, but now it carried the authority of someone who had once commanded armies and fleets and had never lost a battle that really mattered. He said, "Commander, you have 3 seconds to decide how this ends." The docking bay became so quiet that the only sounds were the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant noise of ships moving in other parts of the station. Everyone waited to see what would happen next between the old human and the Krillon commander. Even aliens who did not understand the situation could feel that something very dangerous was about to occur. Commander Vex tried his best to look brave and confident in front of his squad, but his body language told a different story. His hands continued to shake slightly and sweat was forming on his purple skin, despite the cool temperature in the bay. He had read the files and knew the stories, but part of his mind still could not believe that this small old human could be as dangerous as the legends claimed. Park stood in the exact center of the open area with his feet positioned in a way that looked casual but was actually a fighting stance used by human combat specialists. His weight was balanced perfectly, and his muscles were relaxed but ready to move in any direction at incredible speed. Every detail of his posture showed years of training that had been practiced so much it became automatic. The old human looked around the docking bay, taking note of every person present and calculating distances and angles like a military commander planning a battle. He saw where Kim was standing and made sure she was in a safe position. He identified potential weapons among the cargo containers and maintenance tools. He noted the locations of security cameras and exit routes. This kind of tactical thinking was something that never left a career soldier. Even decades after retirement, the mind continued to analyze every situation for threats and advantages. Park had been doing this for so long that he probably did not even realize he was doing it anymore. It was just part of how he saw the world. Kim watched in amazement as her elderly traveling companion transformed before her eyes. She had thought she knew Park well after spending months with him visiting different alien worlds and learning about their cultures. He had always been patient and kind and seemed to genuinely enjoy meeting new species and learning about their ways of life. Now she was seeing the person Park used to be before he became a peaceful traitor. The supreme commander who had led human forces through the darkest period in their history when aliens from multiple worlds had tried to destroy human colonies, before they could become strong enough to defend themselves. Other aliens in the crowd started placing bets on what would happen next. The smart ones who knew human history were betting on Park, despite his age, and the fact that he was outnumbered 6-1. They had heard stories from the frontier worlds, where human mercenaries and soldiers had earned reputations as the most effective fighters in the galaxy. It was not because humans were stronger or faster than other species. Many aliens had advantages in those areas. It was because humans never knew when to quit. They would continue fighting even when logic said they should surrender. This desperate determination, combined with their technical skills and tactical thinking, made them extremely dangerous opponents. Commander Vex finally found his voice and tried to sound confident as he spoke to Park. He said, "You are just one old man, and I have 6 trained warriors with me, all veterans of multiple campaigns. What could you possibly do against all of us working together?" Park smiled, but it was not the gentle smile of a grandfather anymore. It was the cold smile of a predator who had been in this exact situation many times before and knew exactly how it would end. His response was spoken in the same quiet voice, but every word carried the weight of absolute certainty. He said, "Commander, you are thinking like someone who fights for honor or glory or territorial control. But humans fight for survival, and we have been doing it for so long that it has become an instinct that we cannot turn off. When we are threatened, we do not think about winning or losing. We only think about making sure the threat is eliminated completely." Park took another step forward, and one of Vex's soldiers actually moved backward without thinking about it. The movement was small, but everyone in the bay noticed it. Fear was beginning to spread through the alien squad like a disease, and they were starting to understand that the stories about human warriors might not be exaggerated after all. The old human continued speaking in his calm educational tone, like a teacher explaining something important to students who needed to learn a vital lesson. He said, "When I was young, I fought space pirates who would torture their prisoners for entertainment before killing them. I have faced alien warriors who were 3 times my size and had weapons that could cut through starship armor like paper." He paused for a moment and looked directly at each of the Krillin soldiers, making eye contact that made them feel like he was looking into their souls and seeing all their fears and weaknesses. Then he continued, "I have commanded battles where the survival of entire human colonies with millions of civilians depended on making the right decision in a few seconds, with incomplete information." Park gestured slightly toward the Krillin squad and asked, "Do you really think I'm afraid of 6 soldiers in a public space station, where there are security systems and witnesses and rules about behavior? Do you think someone who has survived everything I have survived would be intimidated by this situation?" The truth hit Commander Vex like a physical blow to his stomach. This was not just about respect or honor anymore. This old human had spent 45 years learning exactly how to kill aliens like Krillins. He knew every weakness in their anatomy, and every flaw in their fighting techniques, and every psychological pressure point that would make them break under stress. Park probably had access to classified human military information about Krillin, combat capabilities that was gathered during decades of conflicts between their species. He knew things about fighting Krillins that even most Krillin soldiers did not know about themselves. The old man took one more step forward and spoke his final warning. He said, 3 seconds, Commander. Choose wisely." Time seemed to slow down as Park began to move. He did not rush forward like most fighters would or charge with loud battle cries like warriors in ancient stories. Instead, he moved with the smooth, controlled precision of someone who had trained for decades until every motion became perfect and automatic. His first target was the Krillin soldier standing closest to Kim. Park wanted to make sure the translator was safe before he dealt with the other threats. The alien warrior was twice Park's size, with 4 powerful arms and thick armor plating under his uniform. But none of these advantages would help him in the next few seconds. Park reached into his work belt and pulled out a small metal tool that was normally used for making repairs on spacecraft engines. It was just a simple wrench, but in his hands it became a deadly weapon. He had learned long ago that anything could be dangerous if you knew how to use it properly and had the skill to apply it in the right way. The human struck 3 specific points on the Krillin soldier's body in less than 2 seconds. These were pressure points that every human military officer learned about when studying different alien species. The locations where nerve clusters were close to the surface, and a precise blow could disable an opponent without causing permanent damage. The alien warrior collapsed immediately. He was not dead or even seriously injured, but he was completely unable to move or fight. His nervous system had been disrupted in a way that would leave him conscious but helpless for several minutes, until the effects wore off. It was a technique that required perfect knowledge of alien anatomy, combined with exact timing and placement. The other Krillin soldiers tried to react, but they were too slow and too surprised by what had just happened. Park was already moving to his next target, using the momentum from his first attack to flow seamlessly into his second. This was what made human fighters so dangerous. They did not pause between attacks or waste time celebrating small victories. The second soldier threw a punch that would have crushed a normal human skull like an egg. But Park was not there when the fist arrived. He had moved slightly to one side and used the alien's own weight and momentum against him. The Krillin warrior's punch missed its target and carried him forward into a metal support beam with enough force to dent the thick steel. Kim watched in complete amazement as the elderly man she thought she knew became something entirely different. Every movement was economical and precise, wasting no energy and leaving no opening for his opponents to counterattack. This was not just fighting. This was combat elevated to the level of art through decades of practice and refinement. The old human moved between his enemies like water flowing around rocks. He was always exactly where he needed to be and never where his opponents expected him to be. His small size, which had seemed like a weakness, now became a tremendous advantage. He was harder to hit and faster to move, and he knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum effect. Commander Vex tried to join the battle, but Park was already there waiting for him. The human had anticipated every possible move the Krillin commander might make, and had prepared responses for all of them. This was the difference between someone who had learned to fight and someone who had lived to fight for his entire adult life. A precise blow to Vex's knee joint caused the larger alien to drop down on one leg. The strike hit the exact spot where Krillin anatomy was weakest and most vulnerable. Before Vex could recover, Park delivered a second strike to his wrist that made his fingers go numb and forced him to drop his energy weapon. The remaining soldiers hesitated for the first time since the fight began. They had started with confidence, thinking that 6 trained warriors could easily defeat one old human. Now 3 of their squad were down, and Park was not even breathing hard or showing signs of fatigue. He looked like he could continue this all day. Other aliens throughout the docking bay stopped pretending to work on their own business and openly stared at what was happening. Some pulled out recording devices knowing they were witnessing something that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. The story of the old human who fought 6 trained alien warriors and made it look easy. But the most shocking part was not Park's fighting skill or his knowledge of alien anatomy. It was his restraint and control. Every alien he had taken down was injured but not permanently damaged. He could have killed them all very easily, but he chose not to. This level of control in combat was something that took decades to master. Most warriors fought with emotion, letting anger or fear or excitement drive their actions. Park fought with pure technique and discipline, like a surgeon performing a delicate operation. He did exactly what was necessary to neutralize each threat, and nothing more. No wasted motion, and no unnecessary violence. Park looked at the 3 soldiers who were still standing and spoke in the same calm voice he had been using all along. He said, "You can keep fighting and I will keep winning, or you can help your commander up and walk away from this. The choice is yours to make." His words carried no anger or hatred or desire for revenge, just the cold certainty of someone who had been in similar situations many times before and knew exactly how they always ended. The remaining soldiers looked at their defeated comrades and realized they were facing something far beyond their experience or training. Commander Vex struggled to stand on his injured leg and looked around at his elite squad. In less than 30 seconds, one old human had neutralized most of his warriors without even trying hard or working up a sweat. The stories and legends were not myths after all. They were warnings that his people should have taken more seriously. The Krillin commander finally understood what his ancestors had learned during the early conflicts with human forces. It was not that humans were unbeatable in combat. It was that they never knew when they were beaten and would continue fighting, long after other species would have surrendered or retreated to fight another day. Commander Vex knelt on the floor of the docking bay, not from choice, but because his injured leg would no longer support his weight. Around him lay his elite squad of Krillin warriors, who had been trained from childhood to be the finest soldiers in their empire. Some were unconscious from precise strikes to their nervous systems. Others were awake but unable to move due to temporary paralysis of key muscle groups. Park walked over to where the alien commander knelt and sat down on a nearby cargo container. This brought him to eye level with Vex and showed a kind of respect that warriors give to each other after a battle has ended. Up close, the Krillon could see that the old human was barely breathing hard from the fight, and his hands were not even shaking from adrenaline. For Park, this had not been a desperate struggle for survival or a test of his abilities against worthy opponents. This had been just another situation that required the application of skills he had learned decades ago and practiced so much they had become automatic responses. The fight had been over before it really began. Commander Vex said in a voice full of pain and confusion, "What are you?" The question came out before he could stop himself. He had thought he understood what humans were like based on reports from other alien species. Small, weak beings who had somehow managed to spread across several star systems through luck and technology, rather than strength. Park looked at the alien commander with something that might have been sympathy in his eyes. He said, "Commander, I want you to understand something important. I did not fight you and your soldiers to prove how tough humans are or to show off my combat skills. I fought you because you made a choice that could have started a war between our species." Vex looked, confused, still trying to process what had just happened and why this old human was talking about war. Instead of gloating over his victory, Park continued speaking in the same patient tone he might use when teaching a child an important lesson about life. He said, "When you slapped me, every human in the galaxy felt that insult. We are connected by communication networks that span dozens of star systems and carry information faster than most starships can travel. Right now, human military commanders are asking me if they should respond to this attack on our newest ambassador." The color drained from Vex's purple face as he began to understand the bigger picture. This had not been just a fight between individuals or even a conflict between two small groups. This was a diplomatic incident that could escalate into something much worse if it was not handled properly. Kim stepped forward, knowing that her job as translator made her responsible for helping both sides communicate clearly. She addressed the growing crowd of aliens who had gathered to watch the confrontation and its aftermath. She said in a loud, clear voice, "The human government sent Commander Park here as a gesture of peace and friendship. He came without weapons or bodyguards, trusting in galactic law and civilized behavior to keep him safe. Today, that trust was betrayed by unprovoked violence." The aliens in the crowd began to murmur among themselves as they realized they were witnessing something that could change the balance of power in this part of the galaxy. If humans decided that peaceful trade was not possible, they might choose other methods to get the resources and partnerships they needed. Methods that would make everyone very uncomfortable. Humans were still new to the galactic community, but they had technology and weapons that made other species nervous. Their ships were fast and well-armed. Their soldiers were skilled and absolutely fearless in combat. Most importantly, they had a history of winning wars against much larger and more powerful enemies through superior tactics and unbreakable determination. Park stood up slowly and helped Commander Vex get to his feet, showing the kind of courtesy that professional soldiers give each other even after fighting. He said, "I'm going to make you an offer, Commander. You have two choices about how to report this incident to your superiors." Vex nodded, waiting to hear what the human would propose. His leg was still painful, but he could stand with effort, and his mind was clearing as the shock of defeat began to wear off. Park continued, "You can report this as an unprovoked attack by a dangerous human who assaulted Krillin military personnel without cause. Your empire will probably declare humans an enemy species and ban us from all Krillon space. This will mean constant military tension and possibly open warfare between our peoples." The alien commander understood the implications of such a choice. The Krillin Empire was powerful, but humans had already proven they were dangerous opponents who did not follow normal rules of warfare. A conflict between their species would be costly and destructive for everyone involved. Park went on. "Or you can report that you made a mistake in judgment, learned from the experience, and established positive first contact with human representatives. You can recommend that the Krillin Empire pursue diplomatic and trade relationships with humanity, based on mutual respect and shared interests." He gestured toward his injured opponents and added, "Your soldiers will recover completely within a few hours with no permanent damage. The medical facilities on this station are excellent and Krillin physiology is very resilient. This incident can disappear from official records if you choose to handle it properly. Commander Vex looked at his defeated squad, then at the crowd, of watching aliens, then back at the old human who had just taught him the most important lesson of his military career. Some enemies were too dangerous to fight, and too valuable to lose as potential allies. The Krillin commander had spent his entire adult life believing that strength was the only thing that mattered in the galaxy. The strong took what they wanted and the weak accepted whatever they were given. But Park had shown him a different kind of strength, the strength to choose peace when you had the power to choose war. Slowly and painfully, Commander Vex performed the human gesture that had started this whole confrontation. He bowed his head in respect, just as Park had done when they first met. But now he understood what the gesture really meant. It was not submission or mockery. It was recognition of worth and a desire for peaceful relations. He said in a formal voice, "Commander Park, I apologize for my actions and request that this incident be resolved through diplomatic channels rather than military ones." The Krillin Empire would be honored to establish friendly relations with humanity based on mutual respect and understanding. 3 hours after the confrontation in the docking bay, life on Nexus Prime Station had returned to its normal rhythm of ships arriving and departing, while traders from dozens of worlds conducted their business. But even though everything looked the same on the surface, something fundamental had changed in how the galaxy viewed humanity and their place among the stars. Word of the incident had spread far beyond the confines of the trading station. Faster-than-light communication networks carried the story to alien colonies and military bases and government centers across multiple star systems. The tale grew with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. An old human had been attacked and had responded by defeating 6 trained alien warriors in less than 30 seconds. Park sat in the station's medical facility getting his broken nose properly treated by a skilled healer-class alien who kept asking detailed questions about human anatomy and physiology. The creature was genuinely curious about how human bodies worked and what kind of training could produce the fighting abilities it had witnessed in the docking bay. The old soldier answered each question patiently and thoroughly, understanding that sharing knowledge was an important part of building trust between different species. He explained how human military training worked and why humans seemed to have such an advantage in hand-to-hand combat situations. Kim sat in a chair nearby, still processing everything she had witnessed and learned about her traveling companion. The gentle grandfather figure she had known for months had revealed himself to be one of the most legendary warriors in galactic history. She was having trouble reconciling these two very different images of the same person. Finally, she asked the question that had been bothering her all afternoon. She said, "Park, why did you never tell me who you really were during all our months of traveling together? I feel like I did not know the real you at all." Park smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the kind elderly trader she had always thought he was. He said, "Because that is not who I am anymore, Kim. I spent 45 years being Supreme Commander Park, making decisions about war and peace and life and death for millions of people. Now I am just Park, an old man who wants to help humans find their rightful place among the stars through trade and diplomacy instead of conquest and violence." But they both knew that explanation was not entirely accurate. What had happened in the docking bay proved that some things never really leave a person, no matter how much they might want to move beyond their past. The skills and instincts and ability to make hard choices in dangerous situations become part of who someone is forever. The medical bay doors opened and Commander Vex walked in, moving with a slight limp but otherwise fully recovered from his injuries. His squad had also been treated and released, though they were all much quieter and more respectful than they had been before their encounter with human combat capabilities. The Krillin warrior approached Park's medical bed and offered a formal military salute that showed deep respect between professional soldiers who had tested each other in battle. It was a gesture that transcended species differences and spoke to the universal brotherhood of those who had faced life and death situations together. Commander Vex said in a voice that carried throughout the medical facility, "I have spoken with my superiors about today's events. The Krillin Empire would like to establish a formal military exchange program with human forces. We believe both species could learn valuable skills and techniques from each other through cooperation and shared training. Park nodded his approval, understanding that this was exactly the kind of positive outcome he had hoped for when he chose restraint and diplomacy over revenge and violence. He said, "I will pass your request along to the appropriate human authorities, Commander. I believe they will be very interested in such an arrangement." As the alien officer prepared to leave, Kim asked him a question that revealed her lingering confusion about the whole situation. She said, "Commander Vex, what made you change your mind about humans so completely? A few hours ago you thought we were weak and worthless." Vex paused at the doorway and considered his answer carefully. When he spoke, his words carried the wisdom of someone who had learned an important lesson about judging others based on appearances or assumptions. He said, "I learned that strength comes in many different forms, and the most dangerous enemies are often those who choose not to use their full power. Commander Park could have killed my entire squad in the same amount of time it took him to disable us. The fact that he chose not to do so shows a kind of strength that my species has never fully understood." After the Krillin commander left, Kim turned back to Park with one final question that had been troubling her since the fight ended. She said, "What would have happened if you had decided to kill them instead of just stopping them from fighting?" Park was quiet for a long time, staring out the medical bay window at the endless stars beyond the station. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of military experience and the memory of battles fought in the darkness between worlds. He said, "The galaxy would have learned why humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before we ever reached the stars. We had to become very good at warfare because we had no other choice if we wanted to survive as a species. Now we have choices, and that makes all the difference in how we interact with other beings." Park paused and looked directly at Kim with eyes that seemed to see far beyond the present moment into possibilities and futures that others could not imagine. He continued, "But if aliens decide that humans cannot be reasoned with or bargained with or treated as equals, then we will show them what we learned during all those centuries of fighting for our lives on Earth." The old soldier turned back to the window and watched as ships from a dozen different worlds moved through space around the trading station. Each vessel represented a different species with its own history and culture and way of understanding the universe. Most of them had evolved on worlds where cooperation was necessary for survival. Humans were different, though. They had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them, from the weather to the animals to other humans. This had made them incredibly tough and adaptable, but also gave them a perspective on violence that other species found difficult to understand. News of the incident reached Earth within days, carried by the faster-than-light communication networks that connected human colonies across multiple star systems. The response from human leadership was exactly what Park had expected it would be. Instead of anger or calls for military action, they used the event as an opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to peaceful solutions. But the message that went out to alien governments was very clear. Humans were willing partners in trade and diplomacy who wanted nothing more than to find their place in the galactic community. However, they were also not helpless victims who could be pushed around or treated with disrespect by anyone who thought they were weak. Within a month, 3 more alien species requested formal diplomatic meetings with human representatives. The Andromedans, who controlled several important mining worlds. The Centauri Collective, who had the most advanced medical technology in known space. The Vegan Trade Consortium, who operated the largest shipping networks between star systems. All of them had received reports about what happened on Nexus Prime Station and wanted to make sure their first contacts with humanity went more smoothly than the Krillon experience had. They understood that humans were a species worth having as friends and too dangerous to have as enemies. Park returned to his work as a trade ambassador, but now he carried a different kind of authority when dealing with alien species. Other beings approached him with genuine respect rather than the condescending attitude he had faced before. They had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons or even their fighting abilities. Their greatest strength was their wisdom to choose peace from a position of power rather than from weakness. They could be reasonable and diplomatic because they were strong enough to defend themselves if diplomacy failed. This gave their words weight and made other species take human proposals seriously. The old soldier's reputation spread throughout the galaxy, not as a cautionary tale about human violence, but as an example of human restraint and wisdom. The story became a lesson taught in diplomatic schools on a dozen worlds about how true strength sometimes means choosing not to use your full capabilities. Park continued his travels as an ambassador, visiting new worlds and meeting new species, and building the relationships that would help humanity find its place among the stars. But he never forgot the lesson he had taught on Nexus Prime Station. Sometimes the greatest victory was not defeating your enemies in battle. Sometimes it was turning those enemies into allies through a demonstration of strength tempered by mercy and guided by wisdom. This was the path forward for humanity among the stars, and Park was proud to help lead his species down that difficult but rewarding road.